As mayor, I call this meeting of Staunton City Council to order. I note that this meeting is being broadcast over the city's cable channel and streamed live on the city's website so that members of the public may hear our meeting. This meeting is also being recorded. I ask the clerk of council to call the roll for confirmation of those council members present for today's meeting.
Mayor Coates.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robinson.
Aye.
Ms. Dahl.
Here.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Ms. Garvin.
Aye.
Ms. Meade.
Aye.
Mr. Classic.
Aye.
I confirm that all council members are present.
I ask that City Manager Steve Rosenberg note the participation of any city officials or colleagues or anyone else during today's meeting by Zoom or telephone.
Madam Mayor, all city officials and employees participating in today's meeting are here in council chambers.
Please let me mention that notice reasonable under the circumstances of this meeting has been given to the public contemporaneously with the notice provided to members of City Council. In addition to limited public seating in City Hall, access to this meeting has been provided to the public by audio feed on the city's cable channel and the city's website. During this work session, as in the past, there will be no opportunity for public comment. Public comment will be received during council's regular meeting, which will begin at 7:30 p.m. Instructions for public comment by telephone can be found on agenda for the regular meeting and on council's website at www.ci.stanton.va.us/government/city-council. Also, let me highlight and have reflected in the meeting minutes that this meeting, although being conducted in person, is also being conducted by Zoom, with virtual participation by certain members of City Council, given the catastrophic nature of the declared emergency and disaster related to the COVID-19 outbreak, which is part of the total circumstances, makes it impractical or unsafe to assemble in a single location. The meeting is being held consistent with City Council's Ordinance 2020-04 regarding continuity of government, a copy of which can be found online at www.stanton.va.us/COGORD2020-04. Okay. The next item on the agenda, which is item number 1, will be the consideration of the work session and regular meeting. Consideration of the work session and regular meeting agendas. I will entertain a motion. Councilman Holmes.
I move to approve the work session agenda and the regular meeting of June 25th as presented and the organization meeting in July 1st.
Councilman Holmes, we're actually approving the consideration of the work session and regular meeting.
Okay.
So we're approving the agendas.
Okay.
Did you want to make a motion to?
Okay, I move to approve the work session and regular meeting agenda as presented.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the work session and regular meeting agendas. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Vice Mayor Mark Robertson. Any further discussion? Ms. Simmons, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Dahl.
Aye.
Mr. Classic.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Ms. Garvin. Aye. Mayor Coates.
Aye.
Ms. Meade.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is item number 2, which is also item A, be found on the regular meeting agenda. Discussion of an ordinance amending section 3.05.080 of the Staunton City Code to increase courthouse security fee from $10 to $20. All right. Mr. Rosenberg.
Madam Mayor, members of council, the city's Chief Finance Officer, Phil Traer, will present this item. I had been expecting Sheriff Robertson be here as well, and perhaps he'll arrive during Mr. Chair's presentation.
Madam Mayor, members of council, it's a pleasure to be here. Rather than project the slides on the board and having to space everybody out, went ahead and distributed some handouts. City manager one. And this afternoon, we're here to introduce a modification to City Ordinance number 3.05.080, Assessment Special Court Costs. On slide 2, you'll see the ordinance 3.05.080 allows for the following charges to be assessed: a $2 court maintenance fee, a $25 jail admission fee, a $5 court technology fee, and a $10 court security fee, which if approved to be increased, it would be increased by 10. The financial impact of this fee is estimated to be $45,000. On slide 3, you see that the Sheriff's Department budget equals $581,000. It is supported by courtroom security fees of $45,000, sheriff fees of $2,600, jail admission fees of $3,200, state compensation board of $339,000, and local funding of $191,000. Expense appropriations would go towards the Sheriff's Department for wages and non-compensation line items for courtroom security. The sheriff endorses this change. And that's what I have for right now.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Trayer, members of council?
Mr. Trayer?
Yes, sir.
Has anybody else in this area increased their fees?
Yes, that would be Augusta and Waynesboro already done so.
Is
I
there,
think it's pretty much going to go throughout the state.
was it to the maximum?
Yes, sir.
And then were these other fees here, did they also go up, or were these already there?
Yeah, they were already there, and the only fee that the legislature touched was these courtroom security fee.
Mr. Trayer, if they were only allowed to increase this after July 1st, how did Augusta and Waynesboro already increase?
They went ahead and got ahead of the curve a little bit. Ours would be effective August 1st. Theirs did become effective July 1st.
I might elaborate that on a bit, Mr. Claffey. The legislation was passed during the most recent General Assembly session, and it authorized localities to increase the fee as of July 1st. So I'm certain that Augusta County and Waynesboro enacted ordinances that provided for an effective date of July 1st so that they weren't implementing the authority any sooner than permitted by the legislation. Thank you.
This is Councilwoman Mead. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why was this not on our agenda earlier in the year?
Ms. Mead, this came to our attention through an annual review of legislation enacted by the General Assembly. The city attorney, as you will recall, on an annual basis reviews all of the legislation that was passed by the General Assembly and approved by the governor. And he sends out a package to the entire management team that identifies new authority for the city. And council members recently received that memorandum from the city attorney as well. And so really it was not within our awareness. We were not aware of it until we saw the review performed by the city attorney. And at the time that we became aware that the authority had been provided to increase the fee, we started a process to bring it forward to city council. And that process included an analysis by Mr. Trayer and then consultation with the sheriff to determine whether he wished to proceed with an increase in the fee as well.
So the sheriff wasn't aware that this fee had been increased?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that it had not been brought to our attention other than by the city attorney in the course of his annual review of legislation enacted by the General Assembly.
Thank you. I have a couple of other questions. They're follow-up questions to the very thorough answers that I received to questions that I sent about a week ago and received the answers this week. One question is that if a defendant is convicted, the court collects the courthouse security fee per charge. So that means if there's one charge, it's $20. If there's two charges, it's $40. If it's three charges, it's $60. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I also noted that the sheriff, or actually the court, collects a variety of other fees from defendants with a maximum of $2,600 a year. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I would like to verify that to be certain, but that sounds correct.
And generally, the cost to the state or the Commonwealth of collecting these fees, do you have any idea what that is?
We have a clerk of the court office that primarily handles that. There is the same type of function in the juvenile domestic relations and the general district, but it really doesn't lend itself to. I mean, there's multiple functions within these departments, and trying to do a time and motion study would have required a considerable amount of effort on the court's part, on the clerk's part, and we did not ask for that to occur. You know, so I know that the clerk of the court estimated that roughly 45% of her time, her staff time, was dedicated towards the assessment and the collections and the juvenile domestic. Estimated roughly 25% of their time. So it's kind of a tough number to provide.
Well, I do see that the statute provides a 17% collection fee if a individual defaults on a plan, and while no interest accrues, that 17% collection fee is automatically assessed by statute. So I would assume that unless the Commonwealth is actually making a profit on assessing collection fees, that would probably be an approximation. Do you think that makes sense?
I didn't quite catch that. Yeah.
By statute, 17% of a payment plan or the total collections can be assessed to an individual's account. So I would assume that represents something close to what the cost of collection is?
I would not necessarily agree with that. I don't know that the state is entirely up to date on the amount that it costs to collect these fees. And I say that given that the clerk of the court has indicated to me that it's 45% of her staff time.
Okay. And then I understand that there are other fees charged by the court, and the sheriff kindly provided kind of a general summary of the typical amount of fees charged to a defendant in a felony case as being $870 if they have an attorney to represent them, a public defender to represent them, and about $300 for a misdemeanor charge if they're represented by a public defender.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have another question.
Go right ahead.
So I see that the sheriff has a staff list on his webpage that includes a dog listed as a deputy. I assume that's a joke, but I was wondering what's the cost of maintaining that canine unit?
I believe we have roughly, and I need to verify this, but I believe it's roughly $2,000 a year, roughly.
How much a year?
$2,000.
And does that include the person who handles the dog?
There is supposed to be, I believe, at least half hour a day payment for the dog handler. I don't have that figure, but I do believe that the dog handler, whoever owns the dog, and the handler is to be paid 30 minutes a day, whether they're working or not.
And so the dog handler is not a city employee?
The dog handler would be a deputy sheriff.
Okay. And then so Kara is a part-time staff member, not a full-time staff member.
I don't think that we have the dog listed as an FTE.
Okay. And is Kara a search and rescue dog? Or is she
Kara is a
bomb sniffer?
yeah, a bomb dog.
She's a bomb dog. Do we
Yeah.
get a lot of bomb threats at the courthouse?
I don't know, ma'am.
Okay. Does Kara bite on command?
I don't know that, ma'am.
Okay.
Councilwoman Meade,
Yes.
Kara is a,
Who's speaking, please?
this is Vice Mayor Robertson. Kara is not a joke. Kara is a deputy, as most other ordinances do have. Kara is not a bite dog in any kind. If you come up to her, she'd probably lick you to death. Kara is a bomb dog, but that not only includes bombs, that includes any kind of handgun, any kind of explosives that the dog can locate. And she even did a sweep before the organizational meeting, just to make sure. So she's not a joke of any kind, and she has also assisted with Staunton PD and actually located a couple of handguns where there were children playing. So no, I don't think she's a joke.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from council members?
I just have one more question. The sheriff's department still hasn't come on to our payroll system, right?
Phil?
Phil?
I'm sorry. Didn't quite catch her. Councilman Holt.
The sheriff's department still hasn't come onto our payroll Cronus system, have they?
No, not yet, but that seems to be in the works at this time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Trayer, I have a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to recap, so this fee is charged to convicted defendants only.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do we know if the judges in the court, are they in favor of this fee? Do you know
I
by
don't know
chance?
that, ma'am. But I would say that I believe, and I can't speak for judges, but I believe most judges would appreciate additional courtroom security.
Now, it's my understanding, Augusta County and Waynesboro, they have approved this,
Yes,
but we do
ma'am.
not know how much they went up. They
I
know what-
believe they went up the full $10. I can verify that for sure, but I'm relatively certain that it went up to the full 20.
Okay. And these fees, again, are used for personnel?
Yes, it can be used for personnel. It could be used for equipment. It could be used for dogs.
Right, and the amount would increase from 45,000 to 90,000?
Yes, that's
With
what
this
I'm
fee?
estimating. Yeah, we collected about $37,000 this year, but we had a shortened court season, as you know, because of the virus. But we were tracking the $45,000 and we budgeted for $45,000.
So if it were the desire of this council, we potentially approve the full $10, or we could approve $5.
Sure.
Are there any other questions?
I just had one more, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I'm tied up here. As far as fees go, if they don't pay their fee, what kind of interest are they charged against us until they
Well,
pay
I
it
think
off?
that they try to work out a payment schedule, and then if they default on that, that's when the collection charge gets applied.
Because I know I've had a lot of employees, they lose their license because they can't pay their fees, and and then their fees keep going up, to the point to where it makes it really hard for them to catch up, and that's one of my concerns.
Yeah, and the fee structure is actually quite complex, and if you were to talk to the clerk of the court, so I think Ms. Falls would tell you, that it's a monumental task to get somebody to train up on it because there's so many one-off situations. So it is a very complex, and it's not something that we apply. You know, it is something that the state has applied. There is a few fees that get funneled back to the city, but most of the fees end up going to the state.
Mr. Trayer?
They go to the
Yes,
state.
ma'am?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm one of the answers on the question. There are no hearings or assessments of any kind to determine the capacity of an individual to pay these fees.
That is correct, ma'am.
Right, so rich or poor, you get charged the same amount,
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
whether you're employed or not.
Yes, ma'am.
And actually, what I understand is that failure to pay on these payment plans, and perhaps Ms. Darby could chime in here, could result in probation violations, and thus, you know, things like not paying your fines or not getting or keeping a job, and then result in jail sentences or in having to serve the entire sentence in jail.
I believe that the judges could put somebody into jail for that, but conversations with Ms. Falls is she has not seen that happen on her tenure.
In her 5 years in that position.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Trayer,
Yes.
we do need to move on, but I did want to ask, when was the last time this fee went up? And that might be a question for Mr. Rosenberg.
2007, when the General Assembly authorized an increase from $5 to $10.
Did the council in 2007 approve the increase at that time?
Yes, it requires adoption of an ordinance. So it was approved, and it was approved by if I recall correctly, approved by a unanimous vote.
From 5 to 10, the full amount
Correct.
that was allowed?
Yes.
All right, so we need to move on at this point. Thank you, Mr. Trayer. Item number 3, the COVID-19 response discussion and extension of relief concerning utility payments and disconnections, suspensions, and parking fees. Mr. Rosenberg.
Madam Mayor and members of council, let me provide just a brief introduction on this subject, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Trayer. On March 26th, City Council adopted an emergency ordinance that addressed several subjects, and among those subjects addressed were included relief for delinquent utility payments and a suspension of parking fees in certain city parking facilities. And so with respect to utility payments, which there was implemented relief for customers that provided that that amounts due for billing periods from March 10th until June 10th would basically, collection activity would be suspended as long as payments were made in full by July 10th, which is tomorrow. And as a part of that relief, there was also a suspension of water disconnections also through July 10th. And water disconnections are employed not only by the city, but by other localities and private utilities in order to, as a collections tool. So the relief that was provided concerning utilities allowed, while it effectively suspended imposition of a penalty, and it suspended the use of disconnections as a collection tool for billing cycles, again, March 10th through June 10th, as long as amounts were paid in full by July 10th. And then for parking fees, the ordinance suspended parking fees for the New Street parking garage, the Johnson Street parking garage, the Wharf parking lot, and the Augusta Street parking lot for the period March 18th through April 23rd. Now, that date has long since passed, and if any of you are paying attention, you'll see that we've not resumed the collection of parking fees at any of these parking facilities. But we would like to get your input on both of these relief measures, both the utilities as well as the parking fees, in order to determine whether to bring before you another ordinance that would provide perhaps for some further measures of relief. I can tell you for comparison purposes that Waynesboro recently extended its relief concerning utilities through the end of July. I'm not sure what the original relief date was, but I don't think that they had been as forgiving as we had been in their initial relief measures. So there was a need for them, or they determined there was a need for them to push it out further to the end of July. And in Harrisonburg, from the outset, they made a determination that their local relief would last as long as the local declaration of emergency was in effect. And of course, I think that that's likely to continue for some extended period of time. You know, City Council, I declared a local emergency pursuant to my authority. That declaration was confirmed subsequently by City Council. The local emergency remains in effect. I think it will remain in effect for quite some time. But in Harrisonburg, they chose to align their relief measures with the duration of the local emergency, so that they didn't have to keep coming back to make changes from time to time, but it also has the consequence of just keeping that date going on and on and on. And I think for reasons that Mr. Traer will now share with you, we have some concerns about simply continuing to push these dates out further and further. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Traer.
Madam Mayor, it's a pleasure to be back. I think Mr. Rosenberg went ahead and covered about half the points. I will discuss the financial impact with the water, sewer, and refuge. At the present time, we have 547 delinquent accounts totaling $105,000. To put this in perspective, last year, same time, we had 91 accounts totaling roughly $12,000. And again, this is water, sewer, and refuge. Waynesboro is extended to the end of the month. Our extension ends tomorrow. On the parking front, the waiver of the fees, we're estimating it was $125,000 in lost revenue. This amount was partially offset by estimated savings in labor and compensation costs of about $30,000. We are estimating to use about $100,000 worth of fund balance to cover FY20. FY21's budget is balanced on a cash basis, which allows the city to cover debt service. Without parking revenue, the city will need to record an unbudgeted fund transfer from the general fund to the parking fund to cover these costs. And our first debt service payment with the parking debt is October 1st for $137,000. Our total budgeted debt service for FY21 and parking is $178,000. And that's all that I have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Rosenberg?
Before you take questions, Madam Mayor, if I may, just to further elaborate on Mr. Chair's comments, the concern that we have is that, I think as he indicated, we were in 4-digit territory with delinquencies this time last year. Now we're in 6-digit territory. And as those amounts continue to grow, our concern is that customers will fall further and further behind, because again, this is not a forgiveness, this is essentially a deferral. And so we are prepared to work on payment plans with customers, regardless of whatever council chooses to do. If council keeps the date as it is with the relief on the utilities expiring tomorrow, we will work with customers who have accumulated balances in order to enter into payment plans. If council chooses to extend the date further, we will still work with customers now and as the new date approaches to enter into payment plans. It's not, it's not our desire to create a hardship for the customers, but again, it's not a forgiveness program. It's simply temporary relief, and the concern is that these balances are, continue to grow as each month goes by.
Yes.
Mr. Trayer, do we have any idea of how many of these are residential as opposed to business accounts?
The majority of these are residential. I don't have an exact number, but I do know the majority of them are residential.
And is there any way that if we do, once we set up repayment, could we have them repay without having to pay interest?
Certainly, we could do that, yes.
But just maybe,
I mean,
maybe try to sweeten the pot to get them to pay it back faster.
yeah, normally there's a 10% penalty applied to them, not interest. So but we could work on the penalty aspect as long as they are meeting payment plan setups. We could certainly do that if that's what council desires. That would be very easy to do.
Mr. Trayer, this is Brenda Mead.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman Mead.
Have we determined whether any of these penalties and interest or these past due accounts can be, we can use the CARES Act, the $2 million that the city received?
No, ma'am, we can't. That's an excellent question, but no, that is not allowable.
What wrong time frame or just terms of the CARES Act?
It's general terms. They will not allow us to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Councilwoman Darby.
Yes, Mr. Trayer,
Yes, ma'am.
you said that you, or Mr. Rosenberg made mention to working with folks that are already behind and making them aware that we can do a payment plan if that's what council decides to do. How,
This is Brenda Mead. I can't hear you. I wonder if you could pull that microphone closer to you.
can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Sure. My question is, how will we make folks aware that this, if we choose to do a payment plan, that that's an option?
We would reach out to each delinquent account and contact them and try to set up a plan that works for their individual situation.
Thank
you. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Robertson.
Yeah, well, and I'm kind of on the line maybe where Brenda was going. I find it a little, you mentioned that there would be a possibility of a penalty. I would find that somewhat ludicrous in the fact that this was actually an act of the city manager and then predicated on the point that the city council okayed this. I couldn't imagine that we would apply an interest.
Let me clarify that the action taken by city council essentially waived the penalty.
Okay.
As long as the delinquent account was paid in full by July 10th.
Okay. So, but we could correct that. Okay. I got you.
Well, it's not that you could correct it. It's, you could, if you wish, extend that date further. And let's say you chose to extend it until August 10th. Then if they paid after August 10th, it would be subject to a penalty.
Correct.
That's the input that we're looking to you for. You know, if nothing occurs, then the date remains tomorrow, and amounts not paid by tomorrow are subject to penalty and collection, including the use of disconnections. Mm-hmm. If we get from you a consensus informally that you wish to extend that date, then we would come back to you on July 23rd with another ordinance for your consideration that could be retroactive to July 10th, so that there's no gap in the relief that has been provided.
Another question. I'm sorry. Another question, and this may be a tough answer. Do we know how our community is doing as far as a percentage of unemployment? I mean, are we worse off than other communities? Do we?
I'm looking to our Economic Development Director, Mr. Vaughn, to see whether he's able to provide us with any insight on that subject.
Madam Mayor, members of council, we provide a monthly report, unemployment report, to council and to the public. And the last report was for the month of May, I believe. And Staunton, most of the time has a lower unemployment rate than Waynesville, but it's higher than Augusta County, and it's right in line with the state many times, many months. The data comes from a state entity and it lags. So we cannot put our fingers on July information at this point, or even June. I think maybe May might be the most recent. But we are working on the activity report this week, so that information will be coming out soon.
Councilman Clappy.
Yeah, Phil, I was looking at the impact on the fiscal year 2020, and it was saying that the estimated use of the fund balance is $100,000 to cover the $125,000 of parking fees. What about water? How are we going to cover this money going forward?
It's water, sewer, and refuge. Our water fund is adequate. I mean, this is, in the grand scheme of things, this is not a huge amount. It is growing. It's $100,000, but we should be able to absorb this just fine.
For how long? For another 30 days? For another 60 days?
Well, given that we've gone about 90 days here, it's tough to say, Councilman. We could certainly go on for another 90 days. I mean, we have enough reserves in our water that it could cover it. But again, we're sort of draining our reserves, which we don't want to do, but we could do it.
This is Councilwoman Meade.
Hold on, Councilwoman Meade. Councilman Holmes? Okay, go ahead, Councilwoman Meade.
I'd just like to point out that the CARES Act unemployment benefits run out as of July 31st. So this problem is not going to get any better, at least for our citizens. It's going to get worse. That's just an observation.
Councilman Holmes?
Well, I was also going to say that, we at least got to give them to the end of the month. I don't think that we could spring it on them tomorrow, but, give them some kind of notice that, some of these people might actually have the money to pay this time, but a lot of them probably live in hand to mouth, And I was when we first came in here thinking it might be more business people hadn't paid their rent, just taking the ride. But I think that, if we could postpone it to the end of the month.
Vice Mayor?
I was going to make a motion. I'd like to move that
We're just going to
do that.
We're just gonna get
I
guidance.
was actually going to suggest maybe we just do it 1 month and make it till August 10th.
I was going to suggest that if it was council's desire to advance the date or to extend the date, that it would be better to do it on the same sort of framework that we have already, which is to say that it would be relief for billing cycles through July 10th with payment made by August 10th. And so just move it all forward 1 month. So we would be talking about all billing cycles through July 10th, and if you make payment by August 10th, then it's without penalty.
And still try to work on a payment plan if they really need it.
Yes, and we can do that administratively. Council doesn't need to take any action concerning payment plans. We have done that administratively previously, and we will continue to do so.
So does August 10th, extending this out to August 10th? Is that agreeable, everyone? Councilwoman Meade? Councilwoman Dole? Is that agreeable?
Yes,
Sure.
it is.
Okay.
Now, on the parking fees, my suggestion is that we simply, at least for another month, leave things as they are. What we will do is once we have fixed a date to resume the collection of parking fees, we'll come back again with an ordinance that would be retroactive in its application and fix an end date. Well, I guess it needn't be retroactive in its application, but we would come forward with another ordinance for you to adopt that would fix an end date. Right now, the end date was April 23rd, if I recall correctly. We've let that go. We did not resume collection activity, but it seems to me that it remains a bit premature to resume the imposition of parking fees unless council feels differently about it.
So extending it by a month. Pardon.
We can
Mr.
come
Brenda,
back to you on the parking on the same timeline as the utility fees.
This is Brenda Mead.
Yeah.
I have a question.
The-
Would resuming parking fees require that we rehire employees?
It would require that part-time employees who were terminated be brought back, yes.
What is your pleasure, council? Extend it by another month?
On the same timeline. Because the parking was actually ended April
23rd.
Yeah, so just make it the same time.
Councilwoman Mead, Councilwoman Dole, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Sure.
Okay. Going on to our next item, which is item number 4, the update on the CARES Act relief funds for local government and public safety, fire and police furloughs. Mr. Rosenberg.
Madam Mayor and members of council, Ms. Beauregard, the Assistant City Manager, will present this item. I will note that we're running rather significantly behind schedule. So I'm looking at the next item 5, and depending on how long we take on the CARES Act, because the closed session is extremely full, council may wish, when Ms. Beauregard is finished, to consider either taking up the Gypsy Hill Golf Course at the end of the regular meeting, or moving it to the agenda for July 23rd when we can better accommodate it on the schedule. So something for you to think about as Ms. Beauregard makes her presentation.
Well, is there a consensus at this time? I would recommend moving the discussion concerning the Gypsy Hill Golf Course to the July 23rd work session agenda. Is there any agreement?
I agree.
Madam Mayor, I'm fine with you.
Okay. Councilwoman Mead, Councilwoman Dole, are you in agreement?
That's fine.
Sure.
All right, thank you. So I'll ask Ms. Beauregard to cover the next item.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. And I'll try to talk fast. I think everybody can hear me okay. So on May 12th, the city, we received notice that we would receive $2.1 million in CARES Act relief funds. And very generally, these funds can be used for qualifying expenses that are necessary in order to assist the public health emergency. And they can be spent between the periods of March 1st and December 30th, 2020. And the city received the funds on June 1st. A basic rule of thumb that we kind of picked up on is they weren't budgeted, and you wouldn't have done it otherwise if it weren't for COVID. So that's kind of the very minimum litmus test that we've been looking at as we go through this process. So we quickly formed a CARES Act working group, and we've been working on how we could spend these funds between now and December 30th. Looking at the guidelines, figuring out what's allowable under the guidelines. And as this is a fluid process, we anticipate that we're going to be spending a lot of time on this between now and December 30th. So let me just talk about FY20 for a little bit, which is the fiscal year we just finished. And approximately $158,000 was expended on COVID-related costs between the city and between the city and the schools. And some of those include PPE, disinfectant, hand sanitizer, Zoom platform subscriptions for virtual meetings, serology testing for employees, floor markings that you've seen in City Hall, and especially during the elections when those were occurring, custodial services. You've seen the glass and plexiglass partitions for customer service areas. We did a business assistance in the form of PPE kits for small businesses in the city. And then communications related to COVID. The city is allowed to reimburse itself for those costs that are allowable that we incurred during FY20. So we're fully determining what those are right now. And as we wrap up for 2020, city staff will return in August with an appropriation that will appropriate the remaining dollars for FY21. So we'll be back talking to you about this next month. So as we work through 20, we started, now we're into FY21. And so let me just talk about some of the things that our team has discussed, including more PPE, disinfectant, hand sanitizer for all the public buildings, especially now that we're getting ready to open back up to the public again. Physical distancing markers in customer service areas, signage such as the sandwich boards that you've seen outside and in other parts of the city and our public buildings. One area that we're exploring are custodial services. Now understanding that that's a little bit tricky because they have to be substantially dedicated to COVID-related activities only. So we are exploring that right now. And other fact is that funding goes away at the end of the year. So it's difficult to decide to use a one-time cost, a one-time revenue source for ongoing operations. So we'll have to think about that a little bit as we work through this process. We've also started thinking about any touchless technology for bathrooms, such as touchless sinks and toilets, for instance. And I think that's one cost I didn't put in here. It's about $25,000 to do the major city buildings. And then we also talked about airflow. HVAC systems is a little bit more complicated, so I'm not really sure what will happen in that area, but that's one area that we've been talking about. I mentioned serology testing for city employees, which is an allowable cost, and employer paid leave for the family's first coronavirus response act, which is an allowable cost. Under marketing and tourism, this is a fairly new item that we just received guidance on. We can pay for marketing that publicizes the resumption of activities and steps taken to ensure a safe experience. So as we start to welcome visitors back to the city, we can use these dollars to market that aspect of it. So that's good news. Under business recovery and assistance, we've been exploring several options to assist businesses which have suffered interruptions due to COVID-related closures. And staff's recommending at this time an initial allocation of $250,000 for this purpose. Billy Vaughn is here, and if you have any questions specifically about that, he's the subject matter expert in that area. And this is very similar to probably what you've seen in other localities where they've done businesses through grants or loans. We're looking at grants actually. So we'll be working on those applications if you all are agreeable to that. And $250,000, as I mentioned, is the initial allocation that we'd be asking for. And as this process evolves in the next several months, we may come back to you to talk about some additional business assistance we could do. Under city schools, this is the largest chunk. And they've requested over $400,000, mostly for technology. As you are probably aware, they're looking at a combination of virtual learning and in-person classroom learning. There's a proposal for a mobile school meal program, additional cleaning, because if you rotate students in and out, you're going to need to do that additional cleaning. You'll have different cohorts in and out of the buildings at different times. And then another request is to assist with childcare for teachers. So they can resume their teaching duties, and that's very early on. Brad Wegner is here, as is Dr. Lisa Wolf, and they are happy to answer any questions that you have about their particular request. And mostly around technology, you have computer infrastructure, cloud capability, and to help deliver specific software applications, and then internet access to provide additional internet access for mostly low-income students that will continue to do remote learning. Under the school nutrition program, that will cover PPE, carts, shelving, tray sealing systems, warming cabinets, etc. And then cleaning supplies. I mentioned before, with rotating students, you're going to have a lot more need to do a lot more deeper cleaning. And then the last issue I'd like to talk about are the public safety payroll and furloughs. And there's been a lot of confusion around this because the act actually talks about two different things. Here's one of the example I gave you in the material was communicated to localities that, and I mentioned this before, that only employees who are substantially dedicated to the COVID response are eligible, that we can pay ourselves back for. And you have to carefully track that. On the other hand, the original guideline says that you may assume, for the sake of this, that public safety and public health employees are substantially dedicated. But then it goes back and forth during the whole guidelines between those two types of assumptions. So to us, and we weren't the only ones confused by this, it was rather ambiguous. So we wanted to make sure we had all, the best advice we had. We were expecting to receive some guidance from the Office of Management and Budget. That did not occur, not surprisingly. And our city auditor, who we spoke to recently, who has been helping us tremendously on this, admitted there's no additional guidance. There will be some coming out this fall, but none is expected anytime soon. So the advice from our auditor at this time is that given the city's timing of the budget decisions, granted, remember we found out about this money 2 days before the budget was adopted, and the city's desire to avoid furloughs of public safety personnel during a health pandemic, that she was comfortable that we would use these funds to cover the $108,000 that was the police and fire furloughs. Now, she did note also that if additional guidance comes out, is released that says otherwise, we have to figure out some other way to pay for that. She didn't think at this time that would be the case, but you never know. This is a very fluid process. And as we get closer to the time towards the end of the year when they actually start to have to think about how they're going to audit these costs, we will certainly get additional guidance on this and other aspects of the act. And on the same basis, we thought, we wanted to suggest to you that we would allocate $60,000 of the CARES funds to restore the part-time firefighters. Again, for the same reasons that I just mentioned. So with that, I will, I'm happy to answer any questions, but tonight, I believe we're just looking for your guidance and thoughts on the direction we're taking so far and any questions you had. And like I said, we will be back to you next month to do the appropriation for the $21. So we'll have more information about FY20 this fall. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
This is Brenda Mead.
Councilwoman Mead.
Ms. Beauregard, excuse me. It looks to me like, based on just sort of a quick addition, that you have sort of allocated a little over $900,000 of the 2.1 million so far. Is that?
That sounds about right. Yeah, yes, and that's about what we have determined so far.
Okay, and so far I'm not seeing any money allocated to assisting individuals.
So there is, so one area we've not explored, which I believe we can explore, is rent relief. There's some other localities that are providing rent relief, and that's kind of on my list. Are there other examples that you were thinking of in terms of individual assistance?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, the school teachers, the school system has allocated money for childcare for school teachers. What are we doing? Once school starts in the fall, if kids go to school on a staggered schedule, parents are going to be in the position of trying to figure out, how to get childcare, what days they need to have childcare, what times, and then figure out how to get to work at the same time. And so I'm wondering what we're thinking in terms of supporting the need for childcare by our citizens so that they can go back to work.
So we can certainly look into that. I believe there's some provisions, and I'm actually have a phone call about how we can help support nonprofits through the CARES money. And so there might be a provision through there that we can actually support something like that. So it's on my list as well. But
thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate that.
Are there any other questions for
Ms. Beauregard, this is Carolyn Dole. I wanted to comment about the touchless fixtures for bathrooms. Will that be in every bathroom, like in our parks as well?
So right now, the cost estimate I've received includes City Hall, the fire stations, the library, the gym, and Montgomery Hall. It does not include the park's bathrooms right now. Not to say it couldn't. I would have to get more information on this. For some reason, I think there was some difficulty with that type of system in those restrooms, but I'm happy to find my email on that, because I know we had talked about that.
I think this is an opportunity for us to upgrade every bathroom owned by the city, because it'll prepare us not only to get through the COVID crisis, but it'll decrease germs from other diseases and infections across the board. So I think it's a great idea. And so anywhere we can have that happen, and clearly it's an acceptable cost, I would advocate that we do it.
I would agree.
Are there any other questions or comments from the council? Ms. Beauregard, you can always reach out to CAPSAW, Anna Levitt.
I know Anna.
Yeah, concerning the child care.
I will do that.
And then I know CAPSAW, along with the COVID crisis team, has been working closely with the Salvation Army for rent assistance as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. As long as the furloughs are taken care of with our first responders, fire and police, that to me is definitely number one. Did you have a comment, Councilwoman Derby?
Yes, I agree with what you said. I think it all sounds great. Thank you.
Can I just have one? I just have one more question. Is this the restoration of funding to firefighters? Are we going to be required to itemize or keep time records of the time they spend doing things to mitigate or respond to the COVID-19 emergency?
So that's where some of the ambiguity was occurring. But the advice we have right now at this moment is that they can be assumed that their activities are related to COVID. They're substantially dedicated. But that's where the ambiguity was occurring, because for other employees, for instance, like the custodians, you would certainly need to make sure that their time is directly, substantially dedicated to COVID. But the public safety piece, you can assume that. But again, as I mentioned before, the language in the act conflicts itself in several places. And so hopefully, I hope this fall we'll receive some additional guidance and we can stay on track to use this money to remove the furloughs and put back the part-time firefighters. So right now, the assumption is we don't have to track their time necessarily.
So we're just taking a risk that we might have to find another funding source for this $60,000 that you're suggesting today. Is that correct?
Well, only if the auditor, if we receive some different guidance from the Office of Management or budget at a later date, right?
That's what I mean. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? It looks like we're in agreement with the path that you're taking.
Great, and we'll keep it. We'll keep you all on track with what is happening and what is going on with you. So certainly during the next few months.
Well, thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, we're skipping over item number 5, carrying the Gypsy Hill Golf Course discussion to our July 23rd meeting. So that takes us down to a closed meeting. A closed meeting for one, discussion of possible disposition of publicly held real property at Staunton Crossing, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. 2, discussion of one or more prospective businesses or industries where no previous announcement has been made, the business or in industry's interest in locating or expanding its facility at Staunton Crossing. And 3, consultation and discussion with legal counsel requiring the provisions of legal advice by such counsel pertaining to legal considerations and discussions involving possible vacation of city public right-of-way, application of the provisions of Chapter 18.85 of the Staunton City Code, specifically pending litigation, and a pending request from Village Development Associations, LLC. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed meeting.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Councilman Holmes?
I move the council, I move to enter a closed meeting for one, discussion of possible disposition of publicly held real estate at Stanton Crossing, or discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the public body bargaining position or negotiations strategies pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A3. And two, discussion of one or more prospective businesses or industries where no previous announcements have been made of the business or the industry's interest in locating its facility at Staunton Crossing pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A5. And three, consultation and discussion with legal counsels requiring the provision of legal advice by some counsel pertaining to a legal consideration and discussion involving possible vacation of city public right-of-way, applications of the provisions of Chapter 18.85 of the Staunton City Code, various specific pending litigations, and a pending request from the Villages Development Association LLC pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A8.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor by, yes, Councilman Claffey is seconded. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Simmons, will you call the roll?
Aye.
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 All right, we're in closed session.
All right.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to go out of closed meeting.
Madam Mayor,
Councilman Holmes?
I move the council reconvene in an open meeting certified to the best of each member's knowledge that only lawful exempt public business matters were discussed and only public business matters as identified in the closed meeting motion were heard, discussed, and considered in this meeting, except legal counsel requiring provision of legal advice by such counsel pertaining to legal considerations and discussions involving possible vacation of city public right-of-way, applications and provisions of Chapter 18.85 of the Staunton City Code, specific pending litigation, and a pending request from Villages Develop.
Okay, so we
So to be clear, the closed meeting included the pending request from Village Development Associates LLC.
Correct.
yeah, that's part of his motion.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, so we have a second by Councilman Claffey. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Simmons? That's all right. When she gets back, she can call the roll.
I did.
Hearing.
Mr. Clay.
Mr. Claffey, Councilman.
Yes. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Did you
Brenda?
call me?
Yeah, we're voting on it.
Aye.
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 All right, we are on break until 7:30 channel and streamed live on the city's website so that members of the public may hear our meeting. The meeting is also being recorded. I ask the clerk of council to call the roll for confirmation of those council members present for today's meeting. Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
I can't hear you, Ms. Simmons, but if you're saying my name, aye.
Ms. Mead,
Aye.
I confirm that all council members are present.
I ask that the city manager, Steve Rosenberg, note the participation of any city officials or colleagues or anyone else during today's meeting by Zoom or telephone.
Madam Mayor, there are no city officials or other participants by Zoom or telephone.
Please let me mention that notice reasonable under the circumstances of this meeting has been given to the public contemporaneously with the notice provided by members of City Council. In addition to limited public seating in City Hall, access to this meeting has been provided to the public by audio feed on the city's cable channel and at the city's website. During public hearings towards the beginning of the meeting and matters from the public on council's agenda towards the end of the meeting, public comments will be taken in person and by telephone. Members of the public who wish to participate in such matters by telephone at the appropriate time may call 844-854-2222. And when prompt, enter the access code 619358 hashtag. Callers will then be recognized in order. The public is reminded that public hearings and matters from the public are times for council simply to listen to your comments. Each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. Detailed instructions for public participation by telephone have been publicized over the course of the past week on the city's website and Facebook page and can be found now on the agenda for this meeting and on council's website at www.ci.stanton.va.us/government/city-council. Also, let me highlight and have reflected in the meeting minutes that this meeting, also being conducted in person, is also being conducted by Zoom with virtual participation by certain city council members, given the catastrophe nature of the declared emergency and disaster related to the COVID-19 outbreak, which is part of the total circumstances make it impractical or unsafe to assemble in a single location. The meeting is being held consistent with the City Code Ordinance 2020-04 regarding continuity of government, a copy of which can be found online at www.stanton.va.us/COGORD2020-04. Now, with that said, I just need to let everyone know that we ask that you wear your mask when entering the building, in the hallway, in the chambers. If you have to go to the restroom, please wear your mask. If you want to come up to the microphone, feel free to remove your mask while speaking. There's some Clorox wipes that you can wipe down the microphone if you would like to do so in between the speakers. All right. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like, please stand with me to do the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is the invocation moment of silence. And for tonight's meeting, for July 9th, 2020, we have Councilwoman Amy Darby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As this evening is my turn to pass the invocation or moment of silence, I have asked former delegate and previous city councilman Dickie Bell to give us the invocation this evening. He will be giving a Christian invocation. You may choose to participate or you may choose not to participate. The choice is yours to make.
Thank you, Amy. Madam Mayor, members of council, I'm honored to be with you. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. It is a day that was not promised, a day that brings another opportunity to love, honor, and serve you. And we come before you seeking your wisdom and your guidance, Lord, to guide us through these troubled times. You have told us that where there is no vision, the people perish.
And so we ask, Lord, that you grant wisdom and discernment to those who've been chosen to lead this city, and provide them with a vision for unity and mutual respect so that they might find common ground and work tirelessly for the common good. Lord, we ask your blessing on this council and on these proceedings. We pray that a spirit of cooperation will descend upon this place and that bridges will be built across the gaps that separate your people. Bestow your blessing on this wonderful city, bless our commonwealth, and bless this great country. And whatever happens here, make our actions worthy of the gospel of Christ. Amen.
Thank you, retired delegate Dickie Bell. All right, the mayor's report. First, I would like to say on July 1st, there was a swearing in of newly elected council members and myself, along with the reorganization meeting. I want to thank the city staff for organizing the reorganization meeting and doing such a wonderful job. I know it was quite a task trying to have the seats with social distancing and making sure everyone had their mask on. So we really appreciate all of your efforts. It was well done. And I'd also like to thank the Staunton Public Schools for allowing us to have the reorganization meeting in A.R. Ware Elementary. It's a beautiful school and it has a big cafeteria. So thank you very much. With that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our new faces on council. We have Councilwoman Amy Darby. And we have Vice Mayor Mark Robertson. And we have Councilman Steve Claffey. And I'd like to welcome back our Council Member Terry Holmes, Councilwoman Brenda Mead, and Councilwoman Carolyn Dole. I'd like to welcome everybody and to say that we have a really good group to work together. So after the reorganization meeting, the very next day, our first order of business was to attend a ribbon cutting at Alley & Co. It's a new business downtown. That was very exciting for us to be able to welcome a new business during a pandemic in our downtown. So we were very excited to be able to help share in that moment and cut the ribbon. Councilwoman Amy Darby, Councilman Steve Claffey, and myself were there in order to cut that ribbon. So that was a good day. Also on July 4th, as it is a tradition here in Staunton, we like to celebrate America. We had a drive-through parade that was very sweet, and our citizens seemed to really enjoy it. So that's everything as far as the mayor's report. Are there any additional items by members of council?
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Holmes.
Yes, I would like to let everybody know that if I'd have known that they were going to have a parade on the 4th of July, I would have been there. I haven't missed a parade since I've been in office, and I didn't get a notice until 8 o'clock in the morning. So I work nights, so usually that's when I'm getting my best sleep in. So I'm sorry I wasn't there at the parade, but I would have been there if I'd have known. Thank you.
Right. Any other comments from council members? All right, hearing none, we will, yes, Councilwoman Amy Darby.
I would just like to say that we all received the same information regarding 4th of July parade and emails that went out. And Carrie, I'm sorry that you didn't see that. I don't believe you responded on earlier.
Well, we talked about it. We talked about it.
Ms. Mead responded that she was not available, and then Ms. Dole, she asked some questions regarding it. But it was a nice gesture, and I really, I'm glad that we did it. And I think that it's no different than, council people received emails regarding the Benson Bell trip, and not everybody was able to make that. Like Mayor Oates just said, not everyone was able to make the ribbon cutting. But anyway, we're going to move forward, and just wanted to share that information.
Well, I'd like, I mean, all of you know that I work nights, and I work probably on average 70 hours a week on top of what I do here. And a little bit more notice would have been very well received, because like I said, I would have drugged my butt up there and been on the back of that truck if I had known.
Duly
We
noted.
appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You all have received your work session and regular meeting minutes in advance through the agenda package. This is the work session and regular meeting minutes of June 25th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Just 1 second here. Let me, Madam Mayor, I have a few questions about the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay.
Maybe Steve Rosenberg could help us out. In the minutes, it states in the work session that the rent per month is going to move to $1,500 a month, which comes to $18,000 a year. In the actual regular minute meetings, it says that we're paying $15,000 a year for rent. So there seems to be a disparity in here that I found, but I don't know what the correct number was. The $1,500 a month was questioned by, I believe, Opie Kyer, and that's on lines 396 and 397 of the minutes. And then the regular meeting, it states $15,000 a year. So,
Well, I was under the impression that it was going to be raised to $15,000 a year. That was my impression, but I could be wrong.
I heard the $15,000 a year, and that was as opposed to the $5,500 a year now is. And the $9,500 difference was to be put as the down payment. But also in the minutes, when Opie Kyer asked it, it stated that we're paying $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month comes to $18,000. So I'm trying to figure out which amount we truly are paying.
So what was stated in the minutes itself? Was it 18, Mr. Rosenberg, or was it 15?
Well, apparently the work session minutes and the regular meeting minutes have two different provisions in there.
Okay.
Numbers.
One moment, and I'll be able to bring it in.
Thank you.
It's a total of $15,000 annually. That should be the correct figure.
Which would be $1,250 a month.
It's increasing from $5,500 annually, which is what's presently being paid, to $15,000 annually, with the $458.33 monthly difference being credited towards the purchase price.
Okay. So it's not $1,500 a month.
I don't, we're doing the math,
That comes to $1,250 a month. Okay.
so we can reflect that if whomever moves to approve the minutes would like to make that correction.
Would you like
Be
to
reflected in the corrected minutes.
make the motion with the
I'd like to
correction?
approve the minutes of the 6:25 meeting as presented with the correction that the rent paid for the parking lot is moving to $15,000 a year, which is $1,250 per month.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a second from Councilman Holmes. Any further discussion? All right,
Ms. Oaks, this is Brenda Mead. I will be abstaining from this vote as I was not present.
okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Simmons, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Darby. Aye. Ms. Dahl,
Aye.
Mayor Oates,
Aye.
Mr. Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, we have our minutes. Thank you, Councilman Clappy. All right, the next item on the agenda is the introduction and public hearing of an ordinance amending section 3.05 of the Staunton City Code to increase courthouse security fee from $10 to $20. Now, the way this works, we are going to entertain a motion to introduce the ordinance, and then after that has taken place, we will then have a public hearing on the matter. The public hearing, I will bang the gavel, and if you're for this ordinance, you can speak. And after everyone that's for it has spoken, I'll bang the gavel, and once again to close it. And I'll once again bang the gavel to open it back up in order for anyone that's against it to speak. And then, hold on, Mr. Rosenberg, and then I'll bang the gavel to close out the public hearing. But before that time, Mr. Rosenberg, do you have some comments?
Well, yes, I was going to suggest that Phil Chair, the Chief Finance Officer, make a brief presentation to council.
Absolutely.
And before he does so, let me note that as the mayor has indicated, this matter will be before council for a public hearing. We've made provision for participation in the public hearing in two ways, one here in person and also by telephone. So if individuals wish to participate by telephone, now would be a good time to call to be placed in the queue for the public hearing. The instructions are found on the council meeting agenda, which is on the city council website. And so if you wish to participate by telephone, now is the time to call. And with that, I would.
If I can interject, and for the public hearing, this will be comments concerning this particular ordinance dealing with the Staunton City Code to increase courthouse security fees from $10 to $20 only. Please state your name, your address, and keep your comments at 5 minutes, please. All right, Mr. Trayer, thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Tonight, we are here to introduce a modification to City Ordinance number 3.05.080, Assessment of Special Court Costs. This year's General Assembly enacted legislation which allows the city to raise courtroom security fees from $10 to $20 for citizens convicted in General District Court, Circuit Court, Juvenile Domestic Relations Court for traffic and criminal offenses. The fee is to support courtroom security and is to be appropriated to the city sheriff's department. This ordinance does require a public hearing, which has been properly advertised and scheduled for this evening. The sheriff endorses this change and the city manager recommends introduction.
Okay, and one point of clarification, the vote on this item will not take place tonight. This is just a vote for introducing the ordinance in a public hearing. The vote on this item will take place on July 23rd's meeting. All right, I'll entertain, well, first, are there any questions for Mr. Trayer? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for the ordinance to approve for the Staunton City Code to increase courthouse security fee from $10 to $20. This is a motion to introduce the ordinance only.
Mayor,
Mr. Holmes?
I recommend the ordinance be introduced as presented and the city council conduct the public hearing.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I second.
Councilwoman Darby is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Simmons, please call the roll.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Ms. Darby.
Aye.
Ms. Dahl.
Aye.
Mayor Oates.
Aye.
Ms. Mead.
Aye.
Mr. Clappy.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, now we will go into the public hearing. Like I said, I'll bang the gavel, and anyone in favor of this particular ordinance, please come to the microphone, state your name, your address, and again, you have 5 minutes to speak on this subject, and this is if you're in favor. The public hearing is now open. Anyone in favor care to speak?
We have several callers, Madam Mayor. It may make the most sense I think, just to take speakers any order without indicating whether they're for or against, and work through everyone who's here in person, and then go to those calling and do the same thing.
So why don't we go ahead and let them speak?
Callers?
Yes.
Okay. So the first call, for the benefit of the caller, ends in the digits 11. Would you like to address council?
Yeah.
Please state your name and your address.
Ginger Ham, 637 Parkview Avenue.
Please proceed.
I'd like to thank Ms. Darby for the idea of a neighborhood parade on July 4th and to the board members that attended. During this
Ms. Ham,
pandemic,
Ms.
it was
Ham,
nice-
Ms. Ham, forgive me,
Hello?
this is Mayor Oakes. We're having a public hearing right now concerning the ordinance involving raising the fees for the courthouse from $10 to $20. Did you have any comments concerning that matter? If not,
No, ma'am. It's
okay.
hard to hear on the phone.
Oh, I know. It is difficult. Could you wait in the waiting room that we have, and
Sure.
I promise we will get to you under matters from the public.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Ham.
The next caller's number ends in the digits 46. Would you like to address council?
Yes, what about Mary Baldwin?
And are you calling concerning the increase in the courthouse security fee?
No, I'm calling about Mary Baldwin.
Items B and C.
Items B and C.
Okay, we'll put you back in the queue.
Mr. Rosenberg, I believe we're going to have a mixture of calls on folks in the queue.
So we just have a few here. We can run through those and
Okay.
try to identify.
Go ahead.
The next caller, your phone number ends in the digits 47. Are you calling to address the increase in the courthouse security fee? Can the caller whose phone number ends in the digits 47 hear me? The next caller has a phone number.
I heard someone.
The next caller has a phone number that ends in the digits 73. Are you calling to address the increase in the courthouse security fee? Hello? The next caller has a phone number that ends in the digits 39. Are you calling concerning the increase in the courthouse security fee?
Yes, I am.
Please state your name and address and proceed with your comments to council.
My name is Ellen Bowden. My address is 232 East Beverly Street. I would like to speak against the raising of the fees. In these times, raising security fees without a plan for what it would go for is something that concerns me. And without a budget, I don't believe it should be done. I believe it is not good for our citizens. And I'm done.
Thank you. Is that our last one?
The next caller has a telephone number ending in the digits 68. Are you calling concerning the increase in the courthouse security fee?
I am.
Please state your name and address and proceed with your comments to council.
Hi, this is Mitch Narduzzi. I'm at 130 South Jefferson Street here in Staunton, and I'm calling to express my concern about raising the fees. I would like to ask Mayor Oakes and the 3 new council members to display the same amount of compassion and empathy towards our justice-involved population as they did with their on-record statements objecting to fee increases for other city services during this time of financial fallout for city residents. So I'd ask that they would consider our most vulnerable population of injustice-involved citizens and extend them the same courtesy as they have to others. I would also like to express my concern for this vote and any vote in the future that would have to do with the Sheriff's Department, as it is public knowledge that Vice Mayor Robertson should recuse himself because of his familial relationship with his brother Matt, the sheriff. And if for no other reason than the information I provided every city council member today in email, even as a candidate, Mark allowed his brother, the sheriff, to answer a forum question posing on his behalf. And I just think that there is a legitimate concern for the ethical decision-making process that can be discerned from Vice Mayor Robertson after having this knowledge under our belt. So please take that into consideration, and Vice Mayor Robertson, please recuse yourself from any decision in the future that has to do with your brother's Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next caller has a telephone number ending in the digits 54. Are you calling to address the increase in the courthouse security fee?
I am.
Please state your name and address and proceed with your comments to council.
My name is James Mills, and I live at 1500 North Coulter Street in apartment C9. I'm unsure if I'm for or against this fee increase because I don't understand what the purpose of it is, what that money is going to be used for. I understand generally it goes to security in the courthouse, but some more specifics would be good to know. And it's also a little concerning that it's jumping right to the max right away. The law passed allows the fee to be raised to the $20, but it seems an awful big leap to go from 10 to 20, as soon as possible. And I want to say that I agree with the previous caller about some of the ethical considerations here. I think it would be wise for Vice Mayor Robertson to recuse himself from votes involving the Sheriff's Department because of that familial relationship. And yeah, that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, that's our last caller.
Okay, since we provided our callers through the Zoom the opportunity to speak for or against under one strike of the gavel for the public hearing, I'll accept anyone at this time that's here in person to speak for or against. So if you are for or against, please come to the podium and state your name and your address.
Hello, Madam and council members. My name is Priscilla Piñeiro Jenkins. I live at 520 A Street here in Staunton. I'm against the increase. To raise revenue, since imposed without regard to the individual's ability to pay a large amount of these unpaid court debts will only be not collected, and it's an inefficient way to try and raise revenue. at times not even in relation to the offense that the person has done. Fines is a means of punishment and to deter, but truly it only creates major barriers. Inability to pay the large amounts of accumulated court costs leads to further debt and penalties, including further criminalization. Minimal evidence shows imposing fees increase public safety or the revenue. Data automation improvements, if we just do better in looking at automatedly what we're getting here, will help individuals maybe understand the court costs that are being imposed and maybe provide policymakers information to review and determine if these fees really are a reliable source of revenue. Fees as a means of punishment increases the overwhelming disparity in our community, not deterrence and or city improvements. So I just ask, please consider a different way to raise revenues for such things as court security.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I did not get your address.
520 A Street.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm Ray Ergenbride, live at 204 Fox Hill Place. I'd like to know what the budget for the that, you know, without knowing how much it costs. So I would like to know how much money is being spent for services, and is it charged per person that's in that courtroom? Is it part of the fine process, or is it just
Convicted.
So I don't have a bit of problem with them paying $20 if
It's per case. I mean, if you pay it 3 times.
okay. But how much room secured are we covering? 20 or 15 or whatever the number is.
Mr. Rosenberg, the information provided to the council today through the PowerPoint on paper, can that be placed on the city website for the citizens to review?
Certainly, we can make that arrangement.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jasmine Brooks, half Fayette Street, Staunton, Virginia 24401. I am opposed to the increase in the fees. In Staunton, Virginia, the poverty rate is 13.3%, and that percentage only accounts for those who live below the. This rate is higher than the national average, and it does not account for those living at or just above the poverty line. Including those folks would increase the poverty rate to about higher than the national rate. We know that living at or just above the poverty line would make no difference when compared to those living below the poverty line. And without a doubt, this increased fee would disproportionately impact the most economically communities. And the missing rates are the highest they've ever been. I am elected to represent, and the platforms of equity upon which many of you ran. Doubling the court fees would not only be an inequitable, immoral, and unjust adoption, but the clearest we've ever seen it. I encourage you all to vote down this ordinance and find other ways to fund the department that does not include taxing an already burdened population. In addition, I echo the sentiments of previous callers who called for Vice Mayor Robertson to recuse himself from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Dwayne Barron. I live at 301 Root Street. And I guess I owe you $3 for breaking this thing off the wall.
I'm sure we can glue it back.
I will return it to you.
Mr. Rosenberg, will you?
I'll leave it up to them. Yeah, I will try speaking more loud. I know much you. I appreciate your listening to public comments today. I'm speaking opposed to the increase in the fees, not because I don't think courthouse security is important. I think Mr. Robertson, Sheriff Robertson, and others do a great job with courthouse security. What the problem is, the whole mechanism of raising funds by fees is just the wrong way for us to go to raise money to support the city services. It falls, as the previous speaker did quite eloquently, it falls disproportionately on the poorest people in our community. It falls disproportionately on my clients. As I think Mr. Holmes indicated, it's applied to every charge that they get. So if they have several charges, it adds up. These are people, my clients in particular, which for whatever reason, and we can talk a bigger conversation about why poor people end up in court more often than the more affluent people. But for whatever reason, my clients can afford even 20 bucks, much less 60 bucks or 100 bucks. So the courthouse is for all of us. I mean, it's a great courthouse. I've talked to you a lot about courthouses over the years. We have a great courthouse. We have certainly need for security in the courthouses. I certainly support the idea of having courthouse security and all the other functions the sheriff's office does. I think it does well. But since it's for all of us, it should be raised. It should be funded through the general funds rather than this sort of fee mechanism. And it's a problem for the public defender's office. It's a problem for all different kind of agencies where we're funding our work by individual fees on targeted people. And I just think it's a bad way for us to fund it forward. I'm hopeful that across the state we can change that mechanism, stop not fund with individual fees and individual people. So I think this is our opportunity to say, look, $10, that's enough. We're going to fund this general budget. We're not going to single out poor convicted people to bear the burden. So that'd be my request for the council. Thanks.
Well, Dr. Mary Miller, I live at 471 Albemarle Avenue. First of all, I want to thank the City Council for your responsibility in representing all the people of Staunton. And I think that I'm opposed to the courthouse security fee because I don't think that the poor people are really represented in this kind of a situation. $10 really wouldn't be anything for me, but for poor people, it's a significant hardship. A lot of them are food insecure, their housing is threatened, their car breaks down, they can't get to work. I mean, they have more problems than I really care to imagine. And I know that for people like me, it's hard to have empathy. That is to really imagine what is their life like? What is their day like? What is it like to not, to go to the dollar store and this is what you eat because it costs $1. So I hope that, that maybe you can think about empathy, but I'm not sure that it's easy to really imagine that. So I would ask you to maybe think more about compassion, to look at the suffering of the poor people and look about how much more an increase of $10 would make in their life. Child support, and there's so much domestic violence, and now in the pandemic, there's more domestic violence. And in compassion, not only would you see their suffering, but you would do whatever you could to alleviate it. So please don't add more to their burden. Anxiety. When you have anxiety, you don't think very well. And so they make a lot of bad decisions. And that's one of the reasons that they're in court. And that's one of the reasons that they get convicted. There's more drinking, more drug abuse during this pandemic, and a lot more overdose deaths. And that's all the sign of the anxiety. So please don't put this extra burden on the poor people. Thank you.
Anyone else? We have maybe after Dr. Sprout.
Hi, George Sprout, 41 Woodland Drive, Staunton, Virginia. Having heard previous speakers, all I have to say is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I'm Ray Ergenbright. I live at 204 Fox Hill Place. I'm really drawn back that we want to impose that cost on everybody. I've never been in court and paid that $20 fee. I didn't know I had to pay a $20 fee or $10 fee, either one. So why should I have to pay it just because somebody else makes a mistake. It's got to be paid. Does the budget call for that? Or does it not? If the budget is going to take more than $20 a week, $20 a person to do it, then they've got to increase it. I mean, I didn't go to court or whatever. They chose that direction. Now, they might have chosen for all these reasons that people said, but I don't agree with it, that we ought to impose it on everybody else in the community just because somebody doesn't care enough to learn not to do those things. And I want to say in Mark's situation, I think it's absurd that anybody would think that he would vote just to help his brother out. I know his brother, I know him, and I know the family well. And I just think it's disgusting that anybody would make that comment, that Mark Robertson would deliberately make a decision just because of the relationship with his brother. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against? Okay, hearing none, the public hearing is now closed. Okay, as I said, this will be voted on at the next meeting on July 23rd. So the next two items, item B and C, we will have a public hearing for both of these items. I'm going to have one public hearing on both of these items together. And then after the public hearing has been closed out, we will vote on item B and C separately, which this is the consideration. This is item B, consideration of a request by Mary Baldwin University for special use permit for 245 Sycamore Street. And item C is a consideration of a request by Mary Baldwin University for special use permit for 249 Sycamore Street. Mr. Rosenberg.
Madam Mayor and members of council, Rodney Rose, the city's senior planner, will present these two items.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. As the mayor has introduced, we have two requests from Mary Baldwin University to convert 245 and 249 Sycamore Street from single-family dwellings to student housing. These properties are zoned HE1, Higher Educational District, which requires a special use permit. Last spring, Mary Baldwin University applied for basically the identical request, identical special use request for these same two properties. At public hearings from the Planning Commission and City Council, there were quite a few concerns raised by the neighbors. City Council back in June approved the special use permit with several conditions, and one particular condition granted only for 1 year. So it was very clear that if Mary Baldwin, it's kind of like a trial run to see how it worked, and that Mary Baldwin, if they wanted to continue with this use, they would have to come back. And that's what they're doing now. I would note that there was a third application this year that was not part of last year's, and that was 146 North Coulter Street. And that has been withdrawn, but that was withdrawn after the Planning Commission's meeting on this, and also after the first advertisement for tonight's meeting. But that has been withdrawn. So we just have these two before you tonight. Staff, called up the police department to speak. Well, what kind of issues have we had over the past year with these two properties? And police department said they had no calls for 245 Sycamore Street over that 12-month period, and had two calls at 249. One of those was for a fire alarm, and the other one was for a parking violation. We also made it very clear that if the neighbors had any concerns about these houses violating conditions of the special use permit last year, they were to contact my office. I had not received any complaints or concerns about them violating their conditions that were imposed by City Council last year. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this on June 18th, 2020, and there were several representatives from the university that came and spoke. There were also 5 neighbors that spoke. However, 3 of those spoke against the request for 146 North Coulter Street, which is no longer on the table. So there were 2 requests with some concerns about those 2 other properties. But after the conclusion of the public hearing, Plan Commission recommended approval by unanimous vote, 5-0, to recommend approval of the special use permits with the conditions as outlined in the staff briefing. I'd be glad to take any questions council has at this time or after you conduct the public hearing.
Are there any questions by council at this time?
Steve, was the lady on the phone, Mrs. Pitts?
Uh,
The very first one?
We'll come back.
Okay.
We'll cycle back through, yes.
All right, hearing no questions, I'm going to conduct a public hearing on both 245 Sycamore Street and 249 Sycamore Street in consideration of a request by Mary Baldwin University for a special use permit for both of those streets. So I'm going to open the public hearing since we have individuals through Zoom as well as in person. This will be whether you're for or against it. The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to come to the microphone?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jenny Klemenko, and I'm the Senior Associate Vice President of Communications for Mary Baldwin University. I want to thank you on behalf of the University, Mayor Oakes, and the rest of the council members for taking the time to hear our permit requests or permit renewal requests for 245 and 249 Sycamore Street. And I'd like to begin by highlighting the extensive work that has been done over those since we were standing here a year ago talking about the same permit. In that time, MBU has gone to considerable lengths to improve the relationship between the university and its neighbors, and notably the residents of Sycamore Street. Communication was key to this effort. We worked very diligently to make sure that we were keeping the Sycamore Street neighbors informed of activities that would impact them, maintenance, deliveries, move-in days, as well as improvements to the area that we were making. My colleague, Lucy Crozier, who could not be here this evening, was designated their specific and dedicated liaison to the neighbors, and so they would have one person, one stop where they could go, bring their concerns, ensure that they were being heard, and also go to for information and for questions. The residents seemed to appreciate this streamlined process, which has alleviated the difficulty that they were facing previously of trying to figure out who to go to and who to ask for information. So we feel like that's going well. Additionally, communication with our students was also very important. The students would be living in these homes. We pledged here for council last year that we would do our work and do our part to educate those students about the special situation that they were finding themselves. That it was a privilege to live in these homes. They were in this sort of quasi, you're in Mary Baldwin's housing, but you're also living among the citizens of Staunton, and that's a very special situation. And so we worked hard to educate them and also about what that meant and the importance of being neighborly. And we also reminded them of the code of student conduct that they are accountable to wherever they live, whether they live in these houses or in traditional residence halls. So we remain committed to this proactive communication and to upholding and enforcing this student code of conduct going forward. And to foster greater community, last fall, we hosted a successful block party and picnic on Sycamore Street that brought the students and the homeowners together so that they could really get to know one another as neighbors, and members of the council, past and present, thank you, were kind enough to attend and see and experience these interactions for themselves. Additionally, in to communication, we spent a lot of time addressing the shared concerns of the Sycamore Street neighbors. We invested significantly to take care of some of these issues, and some of the work included clearing brush and trimming overgrowth and adding lighting to the area between the Skyway parking lot where these students are assigned to park on our campus, and to the homes on Sycamore Street. So that would improve the safety for our students traveling back and forth. We installed a sidewalk between 245 and 249 Sycamore Street. And we also fulfilled a requirement set forth by the city's planning office in 2019 to build a sidewalk that connected the MBU houses, again, to this parking area, or this designated parking area on our campus. And perhaps most significantly, we worked closely with the city police, with public works, with the administration, with Mr. Rosenberg, to better understand the traffic patterns and the usage on Sycamore Street. And what we found through research led us to closing Hunt Drive to through traffic. And we did that through the installation of a $40,000 electronic gate system that Mary Baldwin funded. And the result has been great. It's resulted in less, obviously, street traffic, which has made it safer for both our students and the private residents of the street. So in general, we feel that we've laid a very strong foundation and remain committed to this type of collaborative work to improve the neighborhood. In addition, I need to add that these special permits are very important to the future of Mary Baldwin. They're essential to allowing us to maintain adequate student housing of our growing residential undergraduate campus. This growth is outlined in Mary Baldwin's strategic plan. Jim,
1 minute.
A minute, thank you. Okay. So you're on track for that growth, and so it's very critical that we have this housing. And again, we remain committed to making sure that our students are educated, to also providing oversight to these houses, just as we would any other dorm. They would have an area coordinator, which is like a resident assistant, and making sure that, again, we make them understand and help them understand the importance of how they'll be interacting with the community in this special housing situation. So in general, throughout this process, our goal has been to balance the sometimes inconvenient realities of living next to a college campus, but also with the vibrant opportunities for intellectual, cultural, and civic engagement that living next to a university presents. And we think that we've made good progress toward this goal, and we resolved to remain committed to fostering a neighborly environment for all who live there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak concerning the public hearing involving the two different 249 Sycamore Street and 245 Sycamore Street, the two different locations?
Madam Mayor, I believe that if there's no one else present here in council chambers, that we have at least one, perhaps two callers who may wish to address this subject. If you'd like to go to the telephone.
Yes, please.
So we'll start. Yeah, so you calling to address the special use permits for Mary Baldwin University?
I am. My name is Alexandra Pitts. I'm here with my husband, Mark, and we live at 239 Sycamore Street. Just so you'll know, we were against this last year and spoke out about it. In fact, we provided a very detailed binder to the City Council about our concerns. Now, for the most part, this past year, the girls who actually lived in the house really weren't a problem. We did have some other issues which I'd like to mention. First of all, Mary Baldwin told us that only junior and senior girls would live in those houses, which ended up not being true. We had sophomores there, and we also had 3 young men who moved in. One was a student of Mary Baldwin. He moved in from Tullidge into Crone on Apple Day and stayed until the school released in March. Shortly after that, another young gentleman who was a boyfriend of a girl who lived in Crone also moved in. He was not part of the university. There was also a young man who lived in Scott House. He left at Christmas. He was also not a university student. So I would ask that the university make sure that anyone who lives in these houses has a valid Mary Baldwin ID. The biggest concern we have is the school has absolutely no oversight over those houses, since they didn't know about that. During the planning commission meeting, Dr. Jeffries mentioned they were probably boyfriends who just spent the night. They were not. They lived there. I saw them every day. And I also have students at Mary Baldwin, some beautiful girls who all graduated in May of this year, who also told me that, yes, those young men were permanent residents. In the time of COVID, my concern is with the new school coming in, that this might become a hotspot quite quickly. Mary Baldwin has indicated, and Dr. Jeffries said as well at the Planning Commission, there would be no overnight stays in the dorms. That should also be extended to these 2 houses. Mary Baldwin has mentioned that they have set up a communication with the residents of the street, and they have, but we have some great issues. Like, I'm still waiting for email responses that I sent to Liesl Crozier first semester last year. I'm still waiting for my phone call prior to this year's Planning Commission. I did receive an email response to an email that I sent 18 days after I sent it, only after I resent it and blind copied Dr. Jeffries. Most of my questions were met with just excuses. We still have a situation where 200 feet from my door in October, I believe it was October, there was an armed robbery. The residents of the street, which include elderly and small children, were never notified. I found out when a student forwarded me the email that was sent to the university students. We still have a situation with students parking on the street, even though they're not supposed to, whether they live here or they don't. Mary Baldwin said that wouldn't happen, but no one enforces it. We have a very small, narrow street. The students still use the street as a hallway, never giving way for traffic when we're trying to get to the end of the street to turn in the cul-de-sac to get out. And we're still met with a lot of hostile, rude, and obnoxious behavior. That has been our experience on our inaugural year. of those two homes being housed as residential halls.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we'll explore a couple of these other calls to see what subjects they wish to address. The next caller's telephone number ends in the digits 47. Are you calling to address the special use permits for Mary Baldwin University? Hello? The next caller's telephone number ends in the digits 39. Are you calling to address the special use permits for Mary Baldwin University?
No, Steve, I am not.
We'll put you back on hold to come back to you during matters from the public. Thank you. That was the prior speaker. Yeah. I think that's it, Madam Mayor.
Okay. In that case, anyone else in person? The public hearing is now closed. I will entertain a motion to approve the Mary Baldwin University special use permit for 245 Sycamore Street.
Madam Mayor,
Councilman Holmes?
I move the council approve the special use permit for 245 Sycamore Street with the conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Vice Mayor Mark Robertson's his second. Is there any further discussion? I actually do have a question for Mr. Rhodes. So Ms. Pitts had brought up the issue concerning non-residents staying within the building. Was this brought up during the planning commissions?
It certainly was brought up during the planning commission, and as Ms. Pitts noted, I believe the university stated these were more than likely, boyfriends that stayed there for extended periods of time. That happens on campuses all over the country.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Rhodes, one other question. How many students live in these houses?
Well, one of the conditions that staff proposed and planning commissions also recommended is no more than 5 at each of these houses. Last year, I believe the limit placed on it by city council was 6 and 7. But the university says they only intend to put 5 in each.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, Ms. Simmons, please call the roll.
Ms. Darby? Aye. Ms. Dahl?
Aye.
Mayor Oates?
Aye.
Ms. Mead?
Aye.
Mr. Clappy?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson?
Aye.
Mr. Holmes?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item is item C. We've already had the public hearing, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the Mary Baldwin University special use permit for 249 Sycamore Street. Councilman Holmes?
I move the council approve the special use permit for 249 Sycamore Street with the conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission.
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mayor Oates, I second.
Councilwoman Darby has second. Is there any further discussion by council members? Okay, Ms. Simmons, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Dahl?
Aye.
Mayor Oates?
Aye.
Ms. Mead?
Aye.
Mr. Clappy?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Robertson?
Aye.
Mr. Holmes?
Aye.
Ms. Darby? Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, as mentioned, item D has been withdrawn. That was the request by Mary Baldwin University for special use permit for 146 North Coulter Street. So we will skip item D and go on to item E, discussion and consideration of Supreme Court of Virginia grant application for Virginia Specialty Docket Grant Drug Court and Therapeutic Docket. Mr. Rosenberg.
Madam Mayor and members of council, for the new council members, this is what we call an add-on. It was not on your original agenda, but as I'm hoping Megan Roan, the director of Blue Ridge Court Services, will explain to you, this is an item that we became aware of only recently. I really would like you, Ms. Roan, to explain just how recently you learned of this opportunity from PCJS. And why that makes it necessary for you to come forward this evening. And then after council has considered this item, I'd like to talk to you briefly about how we might deal with this sort of a circumstance down the road, because it touches the recent change to the council procedure concerning grants. And I think this will provide to you an informative illustration of some of the challenges that the change to the procedure may present to us going forward. So we do have Megan Roan, the director of Blue Ridge Court Services, who will present this item.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for adding me to the agenda. Mr. Rosenberg is correct. I received actually an invitation to apply for our specialty court grants on July 1st. Quick turnaround. It is due July 17th. So when I received the notice, of course, I sent an email and they added me to the agenda. I won't provide a lot of background. I know most of you, all of you, understand what we do at Blue Ridge Court Services, and I know you understand the specialty dockets. I am actually tonight only going to ask for approval for the Supreme Court specialty docket for drug court. We have actually been granted the opportunity to apply to actually write a concept paper for the therapeutic docket. So I would ask that I be able to write a concept paper that will allow us to actually ask for more funding to help our program grow. When we receive an invitation, they actually tell us how much to apply for. So when we receive the invitation for our drug court specialty docket grant, they give us the amount that we are allowed to apply for. So by allowing me to write the concept paper, and then I would ask to be added to the agenda possibly next month, that would allow me to ask for more funding to grow the therapeutic docket. So tonight, I would like to focus on asking for approval for myself to apply for our Supreme Court specialty docket drug court grant. Let me remind everyone that we are solely grant funded, so we are funded by fees and grants. The City of Staunton serves as our fiscal agent, and Mr. Rosenberg signs off on all of our grants. So I am asking for approval to apply for this grant. The total is $67,500. There is a 25% match for this grant, and Blue Ridge Court Services takes care of the match through our fees. So there is no fiscal impact on the City of Staunton. Yes, ma'am.
I was to say, are you ready for questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any questions by council members? Vice Mayor Roberts.
No, I am going to recuse myself on this particular vote because I am the pharmacist representative for the drug court.
Yes, sir.
So I will not vote on this.
Yes, sir. May I add one other thing?
Yes.
I just thought to add this. This is actually a continuation grant. So this is already included in our budget for Blue Ridge Court Services. This is a grant that we apply for yearly. So I just wanted to let you know, it's not a new grant, it's just a continuation grant, if that helps.
And the matching amount is taken care of through your fees?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I move the city council authorize staff to apply to the Supreme Court of Virginia for special adopted grants to fund drug court therapy adopted as proposed.
Councilwoman Darby has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second it.
Madam Mayor, if I could just clarify, I think Ms. Roan was asking only for the drug court grant. So perhaps the maker and seconder of the motion would like to have the motion reflect that.
Okay.
Yes, I move the city council authorize staff to apply to the Supreme Court of Virginia for special adopted grants to fund the drug court as proposed.
All right. So the motion has been modified and has been seconded by Councilman Claffey. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Simmons, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Dahl,
Aye.
Mayor Oates,
Aye.
Ms. Mead,
Aye.
Mr. Claffey,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Darby.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, Mr. Rosenberg, did you have some comments
Yes,
about?
thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Roan.
Thank you.
So this is one of those grant opportunities that requires no local match. As it turns out, perhaps the day after your organizational meeting, we were made aware, and I've discussed this with Mayor Oakes, we were made aware of yet another similar grant for which the tourism department had applied. Another one of these short turnarounds. The Virginia Tourism Corporation had provided a notice of a funding opportunity for tourism-related purposes. Cheryl Wagner, our tourism director, had just learned of it, had a very short turnaround time. I think maybe the application was due July 10th. Tomorrow. She had already submitted the application. I told her to proceed and that if she's approved for it, we'll come bring it back to you at your July 23rd meeting for a retroactive approval. But I think that this sort of circumstance is not uncommon, where our departments become aware of grant opportunities on very short notice, requiring very quick turnarounds. And so we're going to work through this, but for the time being, I would like to suggest to you all that where we have these circumstances, we would like to move forward with grant applications so that we don't miss the opportunity. We will bring them to you at the next possible meeting for your consideration and approval retroactively if necessary. But if we don't proceed in this manner, then there's a very distinct possibility that we will lose the opportunity to obtain funds for various projects of interest to the city.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to I'd like to make a motion that we proceed giving the city manager these rights to do so. I think the whole point of the review of the grants was just so that we knew what was going on. It's not like we're trying to tell you not to apply for the grants. We just really want to know what we are possibly going to have to invest city money in as far as the match goes. But we definitely want you to go ahead and apply for these on a timely basis. So I'd like to make a motion to that effect, that we allow the city managers to proceed on a timely basis.
Should he be allowed, if there's no matching funds, should he be allowed to?
Hold on one second. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. Now,
No, I
further
was
discussion.
just gonna say, wouldn't it be, if he doesn't have to have matching funds, wouldn't it be okay for Steve to go, or for them to go ahead and work on it and then let us know at the next meeting? Yeah,
That's perfectly fine.
For it to be retroactive.
Yes.
Was that your intent
That's
of your
my
motion?
intent. My intent is only that we know what's being applied to.
This is
'Cause I-
Carol.
Go ahead.
This is Carolyn Dole. I wanted to say that perhaps the best solution here is to just go back to the memorandum the way it is with the stipulation that the city manager would notify us of any new grants we got that didn't require a match. I mean, because that's what we're really ending up with. You want to know it, you want to know about it, but you don't need the approval. You don't want to lose the money because of a time constraint.
Okay, because I'm the culprit of this one. Carolyn, I somewhat agree, but I reckon my next point, can I reach a compromise and can I simply say, I don't have a problem with you bringing it for a full vote next meeting. Can you do like you've done some other things that you want to question? Like, hey, guys, we got this grant. Can you just take a look at it and give us a, yep, sounds good to me. And then go ahead and do it. Because you've asked us another question. I've got this issue. What you think?
I think they always bring them to our attention. Sometimes I think they just have to act real fast on some of these that don't need a match. They definitely always bring the ones with a match to us. So I would think that it would just, I never knew there was a problem with the way it was being done before. But I mean, it's not like if there's a match, they bring it to us first.
Well, this would make it retroactive.
Ms. Oaks, I have a comment.
Yes.
I thought the change to the council memorandum was as they say, a solution looking for a problem. And I think what we're ending up with here is exactly what we had before. So I would agree with Ms. Dahl.
Okay. Well, the motion right now is to go ahead and allow that the grant go forth and to be brought before the council for information reasons and approval retroactive. Is that correct, Councilman Clappy? Okay. All right. Any further discussion?
But does that cover anything in the future? Are we gonna have to do this every time?
My understanding of the motion is that you're, in some sense, modifying the procedure memorandum to provide that we can deal with these circumstances prospectively in the same manner.
Yes, that's what I would like to hear.
I see Mr. Claffey, the maker of the motion, nodding his head affirmatively.
Well, I'll second or third that, whatever.
I'm confused. I would appreciate if that motion could be repeated because I don't understand.
Mr. Claffey.
I move that we allow the city manager to apply for the grants on a timely basis and notify city council as soon as possible in all cases so that we are aware of what grants have been applied.
And approved retroactive. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I have a question about that motion. If we're approving retroactively, it's already been done. So you really can't approve them retroactively.
We can stop the motion. Excuse me, we can stop the grant. If we do not approve, we can stop it. Is that correct, Mr. Rosenberg?
If there was a circumstance in which council did not approve a grant application that had already been submitted, I would instruct the staff to withdraw the application.
I just can't see a reason why if we were getting a grant and not paying anything on it, we wouldn't take it. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Perhaps, let me explore this possibility. I don't want to beat it to death, but we could come forward with a revised version of the procedure memorandum that makes it clear that where there's a match required, council for approval in advance, and that where there is no local match required, that at the next council meeting, if there is no local match required, staff may proceed with the application, and at the next following council meeting, staff will report to council concerning that grant application that does not require a match. So there would be no approval required, but we would have an obligation to come and report to you as a part of the meeting package, these no match grants for which application has been made.
So are you suggesting that it be brought before the council to be informed, so the council's informed of the grant without approval by the council?
That's correct. And if you all are amenable to that, Mr. Claffey could withdraw his motion this evening. We can work on a revised version, simple revisions to the procedure memorandum adopted on July 1st for your consideration on July 23rd. And if that is, deemed unacceptable to you on the 23rd, then we can consider some other option.
All right. So any further?
I think that'll be the best solution possible, and I definitely want to withdraw my motion.
Okay. And Councilwoman Darby, do you withdraw your second? Yes. Okay. All right.
Thank you. I'm sorry to
No, thank
so
you.
much of your time on that.
No, we appreciate clarification. All right. Matters from the city manager.
Ms. Oaks, this is Brenda Mead. I apologize. I had a technical glitch shortly after the public hearing conducted with respect to the courthouse fee. And I just wanted to add something for the minutes. That is that City Council has received well over 65 emails from citizens with comments on the courthouse fee. Of those 65, 25 expressed outright opposition to the fee. 45 expressed a qualified need for more information. And over 45 expressed the thought that Councilman Robertson should recuse himself from the vote. And I would like to also add that I am aware that there is not a legal requirement that Mr. Robertson do so. But in the interest of transparency and in the interest of not so much the letter of the law, but in the interest of the spirit of the notion of impartiality, I believe he should do so.
Okay, Councilwoman Mead, I have to point out that you are out of order. However, your comments have been duly noted. In the future, please address the issue under the line item as presented.
This is Carolyn Dole.
Not
to get too confusing, but we didn't make a motion on this last agenda item. We withdrew that one, but we haven't replaced it.
No, there is no need. We withdrew the motion because there is no need.
Well, there is until the council memorandum is adjusted.
That will be brought before us at the next meeting.
To approve, I'm sorry.
You'll have it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Councilwoman Dole, are you reminding us of the need to approve? No, there was a motion to approve the drug court.
Yes.
Grant application. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Matters from the city manager.
Before I proceed with a few brief items, Madam Mayor, let me remind members of the public who may be listening online or on the cable TV channel that the next item is matters from the public, and if anyone listening wishes to participate in matters from the public, this would be a good opportunity for them to call and be placed in the queue for that next item on the agenda. Just a few items for council. First, as you likely are aware, but for the public's benefit, the Dine Out in Downtown initiative has been extended through the Monday of Labor Day weekend, and in fact, we've made a decision while Dine Out in Downtown is a Friday evening, Sunday evening function on that particular weekend. It will run Friday evening through Monday evening to include the Labor Day holiday. In the 2 or 3 weeks preceding the Labor Day weekend, we will evaluate with input from restaurants and retailers whether to further extend it into the fall season. That certainly has been a subject of discussion and there's been interest expressed in doing so. We're not yet at the point where we're ready to do that, but we'll continue to solicit input from all of the stakeholders. And I would like to extend my appreciation to city staff, to the Staunton Downtown Development Association, and to our downtown businesses for all of the efforts and input that they've provided to make this initiative a success. Next, concerning city facilities, City Hall and the Irene Gibbons Administration Building have been closed since the end of March. On Monday of this week, we brought back to those facilities those city employees who had been working remotely from home. We've made some adjustments to the way that we do things. You'll see that throughout City Hall. This coming Monday, I believe it's the 13th of July, we will reopen both of those facilities to the public. We'll have further details concerning that in a media release to be issued tomorrow. I do note that we continue to encourage the public to do their business with the city as much as possible by not coming to city facilities. We have, certainly by telephone, by email, by electronic access on the city's websites, all sorts of ways to do business with our customers, and we encourage them to take advantage of those and to minimize the traffic in the city facilities for everybody's health and safety. Also on Monday, the extended real estate tax due date falls, so council members will recall that was extended previously from a due date in June to July 13th. So a reminder that those taxes are due. Payments made after July 13th will be subject to the applicable penalty. And then finally, I would like to get input from council members. We're looking at the agenda now for July 23rd. We do have public hearing items that will be included on a regular meeting agenda. Calling our department heads. I'm giving pause here because we're pushing some things forward from this meeting to the 23rd. I was going to ask you whether we could dispense with the need for a work session on the 23rd, but I think I'd still like to ask you that if we determine it's feasible to accomplish everything in a single meeting that begins at 7:30, if you would be amenable to that. We will, after all, be in this room no matter what. We will not be in the caucus room. And it may be that we're able to accomplish everything that we need to accomplish in a single meeting that begins at 7:30 without the need for an earlier work session. And if you're willing to perhaps in consultation with the mayor to make that determination, we would still be able to have a closed session if we did not have the.
Yeah, we would still have a closed session. Yes.
So perhaps Mayor Oakes, you and I can talk further about what the arrangements may be, but it may turn out to be the case that we don't have to have a work session. We can just have a regular meeting, including a closed meeting. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Matters from the public. This is your time to be able to come to the microphone to state your name, your address. Again, you have 5 minutes to speak. Please address the council as a body of government rather than individual council members. And as usual, if you can show respect to the chambers and refrain from using any profanity or any direct insults towards individual council members. However, we will listen to whatever might be on your mind. So the matters from the public is now available.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm Marnie Sheets, 121 Carsbrook Drive in Staunton. First, I wanted to thank you all so much for participating in that first responders parade on July 4th. Our community thoroughly enjoyed that. I know you were inclusive of all members and all of our community. We really appreciate that. But what I wanted to come talk to you about today is the Stonewall Jackson Hotel. Of course, in our current climate of trying to erase all history, there are people that want to change that, including the owners, I understand. But I want to tell you a story. Back in 2004, in this very room, I came before council to ask them to please consider approving the budget to renovate our elementary school. At that time, in the winter of 2004-05, we thought we were having a flu epidemic. Little did we know that was not good. Things can get a lot worse. But the council came back with too much of our funds were allocated to the renovation of the Middle River Jail and the Stonewall Jackson Hotel. And as a parent, I had kids in elementary school. I was appalled. I'm like, are you telling me we're going to put the comfort of our inmates and some visitors in the hotel above our children? Well, Stan was able to get it together, and we were able to renovate our elementary schools in 2006, 1 year after Stonewall Jackson Hotel. So we gave the Stonewall Jackson Hotel tax credits, tax cuts, money from our coffers. We gave them to keep their historic value. So if they want to rename this hotel, let's let them, and let's get that money back, because we need that money now. We have furloughed firefighters, police officers, city employees. We need that money now. This city has spent entirely too much money on renaming buildings. I have heard rumors that to rename our high school, it has cost us $500,000 to $700,000. And just think what we could be doing with that money right now. So if they want to rename their building, their hotel, let's let them, but let's demand our money back to us that we gave them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Oak City Council. My name is, actually it's Nelson Russell Ashby, and nobody knows who he is, so I'm Rusty Ashby. Don't ever give your kids a nickname because nobody will ever know who you're talking about. I'm here to address with you all because I love the city of Staunton. I grew up in the city of Staunton. Went to Stonewall Elementary School right up the street. Went to Thomas Jefferson. I went to Northside, which is Richmond. I was the first class in Shelburne. Graduated in 1969 from Robert E. Lee High School. Then I went into the Navy, came out of the Navy. First job was Legacy Department Store. This used to be the kids department. If anybody didn't know, I work in the men's department right now. I served on the Augusta County Board of Supervisors. I was a chairman 1 year. Some of you who really have loved Staunton and followed it in the mid-90s, late 90s, Staunton City Council came to Augusta County Board of Supervisors, said the financial strain's too bad, we're going to revert. County, you're going to take over everything. Next couple years, we had lots of discussions, but we maintained dignified discussions, and everybody came to every meeting, and everybody addressed each other the way they should. Should they have reverted? The funny part that is to me, I was the Beverly Manor representative with Circle Staunton. I was involved with Staunton as much as Augusta County. When I moved back into the city, I thought this is a great chance to help with regionalism and for city council. A big group of Staunton people didn't want me there, so they started underground email that I was going to move City Hall to Augusta County. If anybody had known the rules, that could have happened anyway. The reason I'm bringing this up, because there's lots of stuff going around right now in the city of Staunton. And a lot of it's just pure meanness. I'm not supposed to address anybody, but I understood from the opening that a couple council people are not here because of the COVID. Now, if that's truly the case, then I would hope y'all would work on a way so you can always meet together, because you were elected to serve the citizens of Staunton. Unless you can't attend the meetings and be here in front of us, I don't think you deserve to be on the council. The other part, I believe in the political correctness. I've heard a couple times tonight the mayor addresses Miss Oates. I think that's totally disrespectful, and anybody that addresses her as that should be correct. She's the mayor of Oates. I want to congratulate you 4 people for what you got yourselves into. You're going to find out that you're never going to be able to please everybody. The ones you can't please with, you got to work with. Okay? And the only other thing I would say is God bless each one of you. And I hope the city can work its way through this, because I've had other past members say that the city is under great financial stress. And this city is too great and has too much history to squabble over political things when you've got to figure out a way to pay the bills. And Mr. Holmes, Councilman Holmes, I respect you for how you conducted yourself from the beginning meeting to this meeting. I guess one other thing, I put that in 40. The minutes of the organization meeting, were they adopted as such stated?
They're not ready yet.
Okay. All right. Well, again, God bless all of you.
Thank you.
Good evening, thank you for letting me speak. I'm Fritz Fairfield, nickname 118 Thorn Rose Avenue, and I just have something very simple. Talk less, smile more. That's some advice I received from watching Hamilton on Disney recently. So I just wanted to say how happy I am to see new faces sitting up there this evening. Congratulations, and talk less and smile more. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
We do have some individuals on the phone, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I'm Ray Ergenbright, 204 Fox Hill Place. Again, I wanted to say thank you very much for the way you conducted yourselves. I apologize to you for the public outcry that is unbased, unmerited, but there are people that have said stuff that's not true, just like Rusty alluded to. It's got to stop. We've got to turn this community back into the community it was, where we can get along, disagree, but get the job done anyway. We've got to govern based on self-governance principles. We've got to pay for everything. So we've got to have an economy to do that with. We've got to put people back to work and get jobs flowing, get businesses flowing. And that's what I'm expecting out of the 4 of you. It just changed the makeup of this council. Not that the others were doing everything wrong. I didn't say that. But there has been some problems that need to be addressed. And I think you've taken some good steps in that direction. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Rosenberg. The folks waiting in the room.
The first caller has a telephone number that ends in the digits 39. Are you ready to address council?
Yes, please.
Please state your name and address and proceed with your comments to council.
My name is Ellen Bowden. My address is 232 East Beverly Street. I both live and work in downtown, and I'm so pleased with SDDA and the county and the city for the good communication skills they have. I'm kept very well informed by emails and by Facebook. The one thing I was not informed about is our 4th of July parade. I'm usually very tuned into what happens in Staunton, and I just wondered what was done to promote it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
The next caller has a telephone number that ends in the digits 47. Are you prepared to address council? The next caller has a telephone number that ends in the digits 73. Are you ready to address council? Is there a caller on the line with a telephone number ending in the digits 73? The next caller has a telephone number that ends in the digits 00. Are you ready to address council?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name and address and proceed with your comments.
Sure, it's Allison Crosetta. I live at 402 Farrier Court in Staunton. I was unable to call in during the public hearing on the courthouse security fee increase, but I had previously emailed my thoughts about it. I opposed the increase, and hopefully that goes on the record. But I wanted to call in and just address the issue of citizens like myself who are concerned about Councilman Robertson voting on any issue that's brought before City Council by his brother, the sheriff. I just want to say for the record, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but this isn't about thinking in any way that Councilman Robertson is not acting above board, or that the sheriff is not acting above board, as one of the previous speakers mentioned during the public hearing. It's simply a matter of, it's common practice, both in business and in legal communities, to avoid even the appearance of impropriety by recusing oneself when there might be some conflict of interest. We certainly heard Councilman Robertson seem to get emotional even just in the discussion about the dog that works for the sheriff. And then he went and recused himself from a vote during this meeting where he's the pharmacist, I guess, for that woman who was speaking for Blue Ridge Court Services, I think was the name of it. So I think it speaks to the same thing. I mean, I certainly don't think he is doing anything nefarious as the pharmacist, but he did recuse himself. And I think it's because he is honorable and he does know it's the right thing to do. And so I hope that going forward, he'll do the same thing in his role as city council member when his brother is presenting things before city council. So thank you. Oh, and also, I didn't hear about the 4th of July parade either. I'd love to know where it was advertised. My kids were pretty bummed that they missed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no further callers, Madam Mayor.
All right. Is there anyone else in person that would like to speak under matters from the public?
Hi, this is 2017 First Street. I wanted to address just the city council, but I know that there is a lot of right now. We're still dealing with the pandemic. We're still dealing with financial issues, but is the conduct of this council as a council. I have watched, I have noticed, I have listened, I have been told, and there seems to be a certain air of tension and backbiting and unfriendly and ill-intentioned comments, conduct, or just refusing not to be balanced and work together. This city council is supposed to be a bipartisan body. And while we are going through these struggles as far as trying to get our stimulus checks, paying our bills, making sure that we don't have our businesses closed down, make sure that our rent gets paid, there are a few members of this council that have acted and very disgusting. I did not hire you to have squabbles in this council. None of us did. We had a election because the citizens of Staunton have decided that they wanted to go in a different direction. And anyone that is on this council that wants to stand in the way of that, then maybe it is best that you step down, because we don't have time for this. There's infrastructure that has to be looked after. There are security concerns that we have to discuss. There are things in our daily lives as the citizens of Staunton that we need to be more concerned about than petty squabbles on Facebook and Facebook Messenger. There are a few of you on here that have acted in a most unprofessional manner, and I am beginning to whether you really do care about this city. At least the one sitting before me actually had the nerve to show up in the middle of a pandemic. You not being here, and you know who I'm talking to. You didn't think enough of us to show either. You know what that says to me? You really don't care. If this kind of conduct does continue in the city council, we will not be able to balance ourselves as citizens and officials of this city. And I, for one, am tired of it. I'm tired of the mistreatment. I'm tired of the disrespect. I'm tired of some on Facebook using racism and make a point. And no, I didn't write this speech today. This is coming from the heart. Do your job. Do what you are elected to do. You don't have time for arguments and politics in the city council. I think everybody in this city really does care the way Staunton is going. Whether you lost the election or not, I would love to believe that you still care. Show that to us. Show us that the votes that we have for this city council are worth it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Hearing none, as mayor of the city of Staunton, I call this meeting adjourned.